A pleasant day to all. We are the group number 6 and we are going to discuss about communication for work purposes. So last meeting, we tackled it already about what is communication, so I don't need to explain it further. So before we start our topic, we should first read our learning outcomes. So here are the learning outcomes. Create clear, coherent, and effective communication material. Present ideas persuasively using appropriate language, register, tone, facial expressions, and gestures. Adapt awareness of audience and context presenting, communicating ideas. So, the outline of our topic are workplace communication, business letters, and memos. A workplace communication, so it is a discipline of its own that is unlike academic or scholastic writing. It serves specific purposes for particular individuals, groups, organizations, or departments. So in communicating in the workplace, your purpose and audience should be identified and specifically considered to ensure that your message and the way you deliver your message are appropriate to the context. So, in communicating in the workplace, there are at least 3 things you need to carefully consider. So, the number 1 is a purpose, the number 2 is the audience, and the number 3 is the tone. So, in purpose, according to Searles 2014, nearly all workplace writing is done for at least one of the 3 purposes: to create a record, to request or provide information, to persuade. So, in purpose, so you need to consider this following question in writing its purpose. So, am I writing primarily to create a record, to request, provide information, or to persuade? So, before attempting to compose a letter, you must first do some thinking in order to identify which of the 3 categories of purpose applies. So, as I've said earlier, the letter A, am I writing this letter? You need to question, or you need to ask yourself these 2 questions in order to identify whether whether to identify your purpose. So letter B, what am I trying to say? So to answer, focus on your subject matter with special emphasis on the most important elements to enable you to get off to a running start answering the 5 W's. So we already tackled it in our high school or in our elementary days, the 5 W's, the who, where, what, when, and why might be a helpful strategies in order to identify its purpose. The number 2 is the audience. Just like purpose, this question would be very helpful to ask yourself to identify whether it is for your audience or not. So, by answering this question, you will be better able to state the purpose of your communication, provide necessary details, cite meaningful examples, achieve the correct level of formality, and avoid possible misunderstanding, nearby achieving the outcome that you desire. So here are the questions. So, who will read what I have written? What are their job titles and or areas of responsibility? What do they already know about the specific situation? Why do they need this information? What do I want them to do as a result of receiving it? What factors might influence their response? So that's the end of my part. So let's welcome GV Heine Tino to discuss her part.
Thank you so much, Miss Sarah. So, before anything else, I would like to greet everyone a blessed and wonderful day, especially to you, Ma'am. Now, we're going to discuss about the broad categories of workplace communication. So, technically, workplace communication is defined as the process of exchanging information, both verbal or non-verbal, within an organization. So first is the upward communication, means from your position to an audience or listeners above you in the job hierarchy. So example is a response to a letter from your manager. Anything that comes from someone to from you, anything comes from you to someone higher than your position. The second is the lateral communication. So lateral communication is about you and an audience that has the same level as you. For example, suppose that you're a teacher and you get to communicate with your co-teacher who has the same job hierarchy as you. So that is lateral communication. So the third one is the downward communication. So downward communication is in contrast with the upward communication. So it means from your position to an audience who is below than you in the means of job hierarchy. For example, Mr. Reyes, the principal of Ipil Central Elementary School, for example, sending a letter to a particular teacher. So that is downward communication. So the fourth one is the outward communication. It is a type of communication between you and a company that you do a business with, or a communication between you and an audience outside your workplace. Example, a letter of inquiry addressed to a supplier regarding a delivery to your office. In communicating, most especially in the workplace, the tone of your voice is very important. Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it"? Or what about the phrase, "Watch your tone"? So it's all about the delivery of the message, meaning the way of how the message is packaged and presented can often be more important than the message itself. That is why tone in communicating is very important. This kind of perspective is also known as how you approach. Now, we will move on to the next topic, which is the difference between the reader-centered from the writer-centered approach according to Searle on 2014. When we say reader-centered approaches, readers may read more than the text invented. The same reader also could renegotiate their prior readings of a text on rereading it. On the other hand, writer-centered messages centers on the writer itself. Its messages heavily use the pronouns I and we. Things like diaries and journals are writer-centered based. So they are written for the benefit of the writer. So let's check the example. So writer-centered messages heavily use the pronouns I and we. For example, I'd be happy to assist you with your concern. We will send you a copy of your request. I'm happy to let you know. Reader centered. If you have any concern, I'd be happy to assist you. The copy you requested has already been sent. You will be glad to know that. Moving on. Now let us define the negative content and how to rephrase it to a more positive climate. A negative sentence is a sentence that states that something is false. In English, we create negative sentences by adding the word not, an auxiliary or helping verb. An example of this is the helping verb be. For example, I cannot process your request for a credit in your account unless it has. It can be kinder in a way of like this. Your request for a credit in your account will be processed after it. Another example is being investigated by the fraud department. You can say has been investigated. We are closed after 5 p.m. daily. Positive, you may visit us daily before 5 p.m. Remember that workplace communication will fail the ethics test if it is corrupted by any of the following tactics, namely, suppression of information, falsification or fabrication, overstatement of understatement, selective misquoting, subjective wording, conflict of interest, withholding information, and plagiarism. Thank you very much, and that's the end of my discussion. Now I will call on Mr. Joshua Patrick as he discuss about the business letters. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss JB. Now, I'm going to discuss the business letters. Business writing refers to memorandum, reports, proposals, emails, and other form of writing used in organizations to communicate with external and external audiences. Business writing is a type of professional communication also known as business communication and professional writing by Norquist 2017. By writing a business correspondence like letters and memos is a skill or potential that must be developed and possessed by a person regardless by his work, profession, or specialization by Norsura et al. 199. A business letter is a letter from one company to another, or such organization to their customers, client, and other external parties. Overall, the style of a letter depends on the relationship between parties concerned. Business letter can have many types of content. For example, a request direct information or an action from another party. The parts of the business letter. First, the heading. The heading contains the return address with the date on the last line. Sometimes, it is not necessary to include the line before the date, with a phone number, fax number, or an email address. Often, there is a line skipped between the address and the date. Next is the inside address or the recipient's address. It contains the name to which the letter is written and addressed. Example, Dr. Victoria B. Martinez from Principals, St. Anthony Integrated School, Quezon City, 17. So, the recipient address, be sure to make it as complete as possible so it gets to its destination. Always include the title's name such as doctor if you know them. Next, the saturation. It is the greeting part of the written in a polite and courageous manner, followed by a comma or a colon. The satellation or a greeting in the business letter is always formal. It often begins with the dear with a person's name. Once again, be sure to include the person's title if you know if you know it, such as Miss, Mr., Mrs., or a doctor. Next is the body of the letter. It contains the main purpose of the letter. It is the very reason for writing. It is the very important that the body of the letter will be written in a straightforward, simple, and coherent manner. For example, shown on the presentation, the undersigned would like to request your good office to grace her an interview with the one in charge of the human resources management in the respected company, so on and so forth. For the body is meant for your letter, for the block is modified block letter formats, single space, and justify each paragraph. Be sure to leave a blank line between each paragraph. However, no matter the format is, be sure to also skip a line between the saturation in the body as well as the body and the complementary clause. Next will be the complementary closing. It is the polite yet businesslike ending of the letter. This ends with a comma. For example, sincerely yours, very sincerely, truly yours, very sincerely yours, respectfully yours, very respectfully yours, much obliged, very much obliged. The complementary closing is the short and polite markup ends with the letter. The close begins with the same justification as your date and the one line of the body of the paragraph. Capitalize the first word of your closing. Example, thank you. Leave the four lines with the signature between the close and the sender's name. A comma should follow the closing. Next is the signature line. The name of the sender is written on the first line. Then his or her position on the next line is expected that the sender will put his or her signature above his or her name or her imprinted name. So, if you are printing this letter out and sending it by mail, you will sign your name in pen. This line will include your first and last name and often includes middle initial, though it is not required. You may put your title beforehand to show how you wish to be addressed. For example, Miss, Mr., Doctor, Engineer, so on and so forth. And the signature should be blue or black ink. That would be the end of the part of my report. Now, may we please welcome Miss Bernardo.
Format of a business letter. So first, we have block format. Ito yung pinaka-common na layout and typically used in business letter. So everything including your contact information, the date, the employer's contact information, the body of the letter, the greeting and closing is all left justified. It gives a clean and professional look to your letter. So in block format, when using this, the letter is single space but accepts the space between each paragraph as well as the space above and below the date and above and below the salutation and signature of your letter. So second, modified block. Lahat ng text is aligned to the left margin except for the writer's address, date, complementary, closing, and signature. The paragraphs are not indented. And also the writer's address, date, complementary, closing, and signature are usually indented 3 inches from the left margin, but it can be set anywhere to the right of the middle of the page as long as yung 3 elements are indented to the same position. So, third, we have semi-block. Similar lang siya sa block format but it has more informal appearance. Lahat na elements or text are left aligned except sa beginning of each paragraph which is indented 5 spaces. And also the paragraphs are separated by a double line space. And the signature lines are located direct center or slightly right of center, along with indented paragraphs. So frequently written business letters, which are letter of request, letter of inquiry, letter of order, letter of acknowledgement, letter of compliant or claim, and letter of adjustment. So first we have the letter of request. So what is the letter of request? So it is the letter which is written when you need a certain information, permission, favor, service, or any matter which requires a polite and humble request. This purpose can be related to meeting or holiday. So this is the example format for letter of request. It has the sender's name and contact details above, then the recipient's name and contact details, then the date of writing, then greeting, then the body of the letter, and then the professional closing, then the signature, then sender's name printed. So next we have letter of inquiry. It is written for the purpose of asking for something from the recipient, and it is also a short letter you can write to request a grant for your organization. So this is the example of letter inquiry for computer course. So next we have letter of order. So letter of order, it is a document that approves the buying and selling of a product and presents item details. So this is a letter that is written by a potential buyer to the seller requesting him to deliver goods. So this is the sample of the letter order. So letter of acknowledgement. So what is letter of acknowledgement? So ito ay isang formal letter used by business or individuals to formally confirm the receipt of certain documents such as invoice, job resignation letter, and contract. So this is the sample of format for acknowledgement letter for money receipt. Letter of complaint or claim. So ito ay isang letter na persuasive sent by a customer to a business or agency to identify a problem with product or a service, and can also be referred to as a letter of complaint. So next we have letter of adjustment. So what is the letter of adjustment? Ito rin ay isang formal reply or response to a customer's claim or complaint. It is also a legal document recording what decisions were made and what actions have or will be taken. So this is the sample of an adjustment letter.
So before we proceed to the last part of this discussion, I just want to ask you if what comes first in your mind when you read the word memos. So accordingly, memos is a usually brief written message or report. Memorandum use headlines, bullets, and lists to organize the memo and the proposal. Traditionally, the memo was a vehicle for internal or intramural communication. A message from someone to Company X to someone else at Company X. The memo may have been written to one person or to a group, but it was almost always a form of in-house correspondence. The usual purpose of a memo was to inform. Often its function was to create a written record of a request or other message previously communicated in person, over the phone, or through the grapevine. A memo is used for internal communications regarding procedures or official business within an organization. So the purpose of memo is to provide or to request information from people within one organization. So it is important to carefully consider the key point of the memo and who should receive it. So para saan nga ba ang memos? So as what I have said earlier, memos are used within a company or organization to report information, to make a request, and or to recommend an action. The following are the memos shared certain standard format features for us to know and identify what memo really is. So first is the word memo or memorandum or some equivalent term at or near the top of the page. Second, the two-line enabling the memo to be addressed and the from line enabling it to be signed. Number 3, the date line. 4, the subject line identifying the topic. And number 5, the message or content of the memo. So just take a look from this picture. So memorandum includes date, then para kanino ito, saan galing, and subject, and of course the body of the memorandum.